Welcome back. We're going to get more into the finer details of the different types of audits that medical record auditors do. Your text talks about these different types of carrier audits, which could be either prepayment, post-payment audits, just looking at electronic claims, focused medical review, which the folks at the Reading Medical Center are very familiar with, comprehensive medical reviews, where we're looking at a specific practice that has already had unusual billing or documentation practices. So kind of similar to a focused medical review, and fraud and abuse audits. We talk about compliance, since the federal government and the Office of Inspector General, which is the enforcement arm, has zero tolerance for fraud and abuse. This is where compliance plans are critical to medical offices. The OIG has a work plan for medical offices that includes recommended elements of a compliance plan, and we'll take a look at them right now. Discusses the benefits of the compliance plan, and we'll get into the elements. There's 7 critical elements of a medical compliance plan. This includes written compliance and practice standards, designating an actual compliance officer or contact, plans to do internal monitoring and auditing, doing appropriate training and education, responding to detected offenses and developing a corrective action plan, having open lines of communication, and enforcing disciplinary standards through guidelines. How to get in trouble with the Office of Inspector General? It's very simple. You can be having compliance plans or programs that just exist on paper that really don't do anything, that really don't have any enforcement or any teeth, right? It should require monitoring and implementation with reporting to both the medical directors and the business executive or board of directors as appropriate. And these audits should include the CPT, HCPCS, coding issues, billing, marketing. In other words, making sure that all your marketing material is true, straightforward, super bills, any charge sheets, pricing, record keeping, competitive practices, OSHA requirements, CELA. And again, part of demonstrating that you have an actual effective compliance program is audit reports. And this is where the interpersonal skills, the verbal skills, the writing skills come in, right? And these should be submitted to the Chief Compliance Office and the governing body of the organization, be it a medical practice, same-day surgery, what have you. And then again, organization should retain and analyze on a yearly basis the CPT, HCPCS, and ICD-10 utilization of the top 50 codes. In other words, you should track what are your top 50 diagnoses, top 50 procedures, top 50 HCPCS. And if there's any change, these are the types of things that are good places to start for your audits. Another area, if utilizing a code has grown more than 10%, then we should be taking a look at it to see what's happened, to see if this increase is actually valid. Maybe we don't need to do anything, but we need to make sure that we're doing things in a compliant method. And again, finally, the compliance policies need to ensure that all claims or services that are admitted to Medicare or any other federally funded healthcare program are accurate and correctly to give what type of services the physician gave to the patient. And again, providers should choose only the code that accurately describes the service performed, the test ordered, or the supplies furnished. You have a pulmonologist who said all of his patients who had COPD, they were always level 5 because they were always 6. That's really not a valid way to code these types of encounters. In order to make sure the coding is accurate, it's recommended the organization require somebody who has technical expertise. Sometimes these are internal to a practice if it's large enough, sometimes they're consultants. But either way, you need somebody with that expertise to make sure that you're selecting the correct CPT or HCPCS code. The OIG looks at intentional upcoding to maximize reimbursement as a false claim. So we want to make sure that we're on top of that. And again, in order to make sure that your audits are accurate, it's recommended that we do a minimum of 1 external coding audit to ensure that we're correctly coding things. That's all I have for this lecture. Come back and let's take a look at the National Correct Coding Initiative, the NCCI.